Commander Zorthal moved slowly into the learning chamber of the training vessel. His 4 legs made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The young cadets turned to look at him with respect and fear in their many eyes. Some had 2 eyes. Others had 6 or 8. They came from different planets across the galaxy. Zorthal was much older than all of them. His blue-green skin showed many scars, and his protective outer shell had cracks from old battles. Today was special. It marked 200 years since the end of the Human Galactic War. The young cadets had asked to hear real stories about fighting, humans. None of them had ever seen combat against the most feared species in the galaxy. "Sit, all of you," Zorthal said through his translator device. The small metal box at his throat turned his clicking and whistling sounds into words they could all understand. 28 cadets formed a half-circle in front of him. They came from 16 different planets. Some had scales, others had hard shells like him. 3 were cloud-like beings who floated inside special containers. They were the future military leaders of the Galactic Confederation, but they had never faced humans in battle. Zorthal noticed one more person sitting in the back corner of the room. Frank Miller was the only human on the ship, an exchange officer sent as part of the peace agreement. He was shorter than most aliens in the room but had a strong build. His skin was light brown and his hair was cut very short. He wore the blue uniform of the Human Space Force with the silver leaf that showed his rank as lieutenant. The alien cadets kept looking back at Miller, wondering how he would react to the war stories. "Before I begin," Zorthal said, his voice deep and slow, "know that these events happened long ago. Humans are now our allies and trading partners." Miller nodded, but said nothing. "Today I will share 3 stories from my time fighting humans," Zorthal continued. 3 battles that show why every military school in 27 star systems still studies human warfare. You will learn why we chose peace talks instead of continuing the war. A young cadet with red scales raised her hand. "Commander, is it true that humans kept fighting even when they were outnumbered 10-1? Zorthal's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "Sometimes it was worse than that, 100-1. And still they fought." The cadets looked at each other nervously. Many of their species would surrender when faced with such bad odds. It made logical sense to give up and try again another day. "Our first story begins in the Orion sector," Zorthal said. He touched a control panel on his armband. The lights in the room dimmed and a 3-dimensional map appeared in the air above them. 15 Confederation ships were destroyed in this region over 3 weeks. We did not know what was happening. The map showed small red dots where each ship had been lost. "We sent our best scout ships to find the human fleet we believed was hiding there," Zorthal continued. "They found nothing. No energy readings. No heat signatures. It was as if the ships were being destroyed by empty space itself." A cadet with 6 arms spoke up. "Was it a new weapon? Something we had never seen before?" "That is what our leaders thought," Zorthal said. "They were wrong. It was just one small human ship." The room went silent. Even Frank Miller leaned forward, interested in the story. "One ship could not destroy 15 of our vessels," said a floating cloud being through its translator. "Our smallest cruiser had more firepower than any human destroyer." "It was not about firepower," Zorthal said. "It was about how they used what they had." He changed the display to show a small, dark ship design. This was the USS Nighthawk. We later learned it was commanded by a human named Alan Carter. It was built to be invisible to our sensors. They covered it with materials that absorbed scanning beams instead of reflecting them. The hologram showed a sleek vessel with no bright lights or visible weapons. "We called it the Ghost Ship," Zorthal explained. "At first, our leaders refused to believe one vessel could cause such damage. They thought it must be a large human fleet using new technology." A cadet with green skin asked, "How did one ship destroy so many of ours?" "Captain Carter used space itself as a weapon," Zorthal said. "The Nighthawk would collect floating rocks and metal debris. They would speed these objects up to extremely fast speeds and aim them at our ships. By the time our sensors detected these objects, it was too late to move out of the way. The hologram showed small dots accelerating toward larger ships. We had shields designed to stop energy beams and plasma weapons, Zorthal explained. But Captain Carter used simple rocks moving at incredible speeds, so simple, yet so deadly. The cadets watched as the simulation showed a piece of space rock smashing through a Confederation ship. But the worst part was not the attacks, Zorthal continued. It was what came after. After each ship was destroyed, the Nighthawk would send a message on all our communication channels. Zorthal pressed another button on his armband. A human voice filled the room. "We are still here. We are watching." Several cadets moved uncomfortably in their seats. The voice was calm, almost friendly, which made it even more frightening. "They wanted us to be afraid," Zorthal said, and we were. Ship crews began to panic. No one wanted to be sent to the Orion sector. Our leaders could not explain how the attacks were happening. Fear spread through our fleet. "How did you finally stop them?" asked a cadet with 4 eyes. "We did not," Zorthal said simply. "The Nighthawk disappeared after destroying a total of 16 ships. We never caught it. To this day, some believe it is still out there, watching." Frank Miller spoke for the first time. "The Nighthawk was retired 20 years ago. It's now in the Space Museum on Earth. Visitors can walk through it." The cadets turned to look at the human with new interest. "Yes," Zorthal nodded. "And Captain Carter became one of the first human officers to work with Confederation forces after the peace agreement." The commander's 4 eyes focused on the cadets. "This is your first lesson about human warfare. They do not always use the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. They use what works. They adapt. And they understand that fear can be more powerful than any weapon." Zorthal stood straighter. "We will take a short break. When we return, I will tell you about the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where we thought we had trapped a small human fleet. We were very wrong." As the cadets filed out of the room, many of them looked back at Frank Miller with new respect and caution in their eyes. The human merely smiled and remained seated, waiting for the next part of the story. The cadets returned to the learning chamber after their short break. They moved faster now, eager to hear more about human warfare. Commander Zorthal waited for them to settle down. Frank Miller still sat quietly in the back corner, watching everything with calm eyes. "Now I will tell you about the Battle of Proxima Centauri," Zorthal said once everyone was seated. He touched his control band again, and a new star map appeared above them. "This happened in the 5th year of the war, when we thought we understood human tactics." The map showed a star system with 5 planets. Small blue dots represented Confederation ships. Red dots showed human vessels. "We had 7 large battle cruisers," Zorthal explained. "The humans had only 3 small destroyers. Our ships were bigger, stronger, and had better weapons. We thought victory would be easy." A young cadet with shiny scales raised a hand. "Was this a trap?" "Yes." Zorthal nodded, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "But not the kind of trap we expected. What we did not know was that Commander Samantha Wright had been planning this battle for months." The hologram changed to show 3 large, bulky ships hiding behind the 4th planet of the system. "These were mining vessels," Zorthal continued. "Old ships that normally collected minerals from asteroids. Not warships at all. We did not even look for them because they had no weapons." "Mining ships cannot fight battle cruisers," said a cloud being. "Cadet." "Correct. But humans are very good at changing things to serve new purposes," Zorthal replied. Commander Wright had emptied out these mining ships and filled them with small fighter craft. Hundreds of them. The hologram showed the inside of a mining ship, where ore processing equipment should have been. Rows of small 1-person fighters were packed tightly together. "Our plan was simple," Zorthal said. "We would surround the 3 human destroyers and force them to surrender. We split our 7 battle cruisers into 3 groups to block all escape routes. The hologram showed the blue dots spreading out around the red ones. At first, everything went as planned. The human destroyers tried to run away, just as we expected. 2 of our groups chased them while the 3rd group stayed in reserve." Zorthal's voice grew quieter. That is exactly what Commander Wright wanted us to do. The hologram showed the human destroyers leading the Confederation ships away from each other. Then suddenly the three hidden mining vessels moved out from behind the planet. When our ships were far apart, the mining vessels opened. Like eggs hatching, they released over 200 small fighter craft. Zorthal's hand trembled slightly as he spoke. So many small ships coming from a direction we were not watching. The hologram showed tiny red dots pouring out of the larger ships, then splitting into three swarms that headed toward the separated Confederation forces. Commander Wright called it the Hornet strategy. Zorthal continued. On Earth, hornets are small flying insects that attack in large groups. Each one is small, but together they can defeat much larger enemies. The cadets watched as the swarms of tiny fighters reached the Confederation battlecruisers. The blue dots were soon surrounded by clouds of red. Our ships had strong shields and powerful weapons, but they were designed to fight other large ships, Zorthal explained. The weapons were too slow to hit the small, fast human fighters, and our shields were weakest at certain points, which the humans knew exactly. A six-armed cadet asked, "How did humans know the weak points in our shield designs?" Zorthal looked. They had studied our ships very carefully. Every time we destroyed a human vessel, they learned from it. Every time one of our ships was damaged and escaped, they tracked which weapons had worked best. They were always learning, always adapting. The hologram showed human fighters attacking specific points on the Confederation ships: engine exhausts, sensor arrays, weapon ports. But the most disturbing thing was how the human pilots flew, Zorthal continued. They flew directly into our weapon ranges. They accepted that many of them would die. In Confederation military training, we teach you to preserve your forces, to retreat when losses become too high. Humans did not think this way. The cadets watched as many of the small red dots disappeared, shot down by Confederation defenses. But there were so many that some always got through. We lost 5 battlecruisers that day, Zorthal said. 5 of our most powerful warships. The humans lost over 100 fighter craft and their pilots, but they considered this a victory. Frank Miller spoke from the back of the room. One of my great-uncles was a fighter pilot in that battle. He did not survive. The room went silent. The cadets looked at the human with new understanding. His people had sacrificed much in this battle, yet he spoke of it calmly. During the battle, Zorthal continued, our fleet commander offered Commander Wright a chance to surrender. Her ships were taking heavy losses. In our culture, it would be logical to surrender, save the remaining forces, and fight another day. Zorthal pressed a button on his control band, and a woman's voice filled the room. We don't need all of our ships to return home. We just need one of yours not to. Several cadets shifted uncomfortably. One young officer with brown fur whispered, "What does that mean?" "It means," Zorthal explained, "that humans will accept large losses if they can achieve their goal. In this case, their goal was not to save their fighters, but to destroy our battlecruisers. They succeeded." The commander shut off the hologram. The room was now lit only by the soft blue glow of the wall panels. After the battle, we captured some human pilots who had ejected from their damaged fighters, Zorthal said. Our interrogators asked them why they had flown such dangerous missions when the chances of survival were so low. "Do you know what?" many of them said. The cadets waited silently. They said they volunteered. They chose to fly those missions. Zorthal's voice was filled with disbelief even after all these years. Their commanders did not force them. They understood the risks and still they went. A young cadet with 4 arms spoke up. "I do not understand. Why would they choose almost certain death?" Frank Miller answered from the back of the room. "Because sometimes the mission is more important than the individual. In human history, we have many stories of people who gave their lives so others could live, or so a goal could be reached." The cadets turned to look at him, seeing the human in a new light. "That is the second lesson about human warfare," Zorthal said. "Humans will use clever strategies and unexpected tactics. But most dangerous of all, they are willing to sacrifice themselves if they believe in their cause. How do you defeat an enemy who is not afraid to die? The room was silent as everyone considered this question. We will take another break, Zorthal said. When we return, I will tell you about the ground war on New Eden. That is when we truly understood why humans are the most feared species in the galaxy. When the cadets returned for the third time, the mood in the learning chamber had changed. They no longer looked excited about war stories. Now they looked worried. They had heard about human ships and space battles. They wondered what could be worse than what they already knew. Commander Zorthal seemed tired now. His forelegs moved more slowly as he made his way to the center of the room. His blue-green skin looked paler. Frank Miller still sat in the back corner, watching everything closely. For my final story, Zorthal began, I will tell you about the ground invasion of New Eden. This was a planet that humans had settled only 30 years before the war. It did not have many cities or weapons. We thought it would be easy to take. The old commander's 4 eyes blinked slowly, one after another. The cadets could tell this story was hard for him to tell. I was younger then. A sub-commander in charge of ground forces, Zorthal said. We had studied human warfare in space, but we knew less about how they fought on planets. That was our mistake. He touched his control band, and a new hologram appeared. It showed a green and blue planet with 2 small moons. New Eden was mostly farmland, Zorthal explained. Our intelligence reports told us that most humans there were farmers, teachers, doctors, and builders, not soldiers. The few military bases were in the cities. The hologram zoomed in to show large areas of fields and forests, with small towns scattered across the landscape. Red dots showed human military bases in a few larger cities. Our plan was simple, and had worked on 17 other worlds, Zorthal continued. We would land our forces in the countryside away from the military bases. We would take control of the rural areas first, then move toward the cities. The human civilians would not fight back. Why would they? They were not warriors. A cadet with scales raised her hand. Was that not correct? Were there hidden military forces? No, Zorthal said. There were no hidden soldiers. What we did not understand was that on Earth, the home planet of humans, many civilians know how to fight. The cadets looked confused. A cloud being spoke, through its translator. But you said they were farmers and teachers, not warriors. Yes, Zorthal nodded. That is what made humans so dangerous. They can be both. A farmer by day can become a fighter by night. He changed the hologram to show a simple human house made of wood. In many human cultures, ordinary, people own weapons for hunting animals or for protection. Many humans know how to use these weapons from a young age. The hologram changed to show images of simple human weapons, hunting rifles, shotguns, bows, and even farm tools that could be used to fight. When we landed our forces, something unexpected happened, Zorthal said. The human civilians did not run away or surrender. They formed small fighting groups almost overnight. They called them resistance cells. Each cell had 5 to 10 humans who knew the local area perfectly. They were led by a farmer named Gregory Walsh. Frank Miller spoke up from the back. Walsh wasn't a farmer originally. He had been a soldier 20 years before, but left the military to start a family. Zorthal nodded. Yes, we learned that later. Many civilian humans had some military training from earlier in their lives. Our intelligence missed this fact. Tiwi. Hologram showed small blue dots representing Confederation forces spreading across the countryside. Then small red flashes appeared all around them. They did not fight us directly, Zorthal explained. They used hit-and-run attacks. They would strike quickly, then disappear into forests or underground tunnels. They knew every hill, every river, every hiding place. We did not. A 6-armed cadet asked, "Why not use airstrikes to destroy large areas?" "We tried that," Zorthal said, "but the humans expected it. They built fake camps that we would bomb, while they hid elsewhere. They also stayed close to important resources that we needed, like water sources. We could not destroy everything. The hologram showed a Confederation communication tower. A small red dot approached it, then the tower disappeared. They were very smart about what they attacked, Zorthal continued. They did not try to kill all our soldiers. That would be impossible with their small numbers. Instead, they destroyed our communication equipment. They cut power lines. They damaged sensors. They made us blind and unable to talk to each other. The cadets watched as more and more blue dots on the map became isolated from each other. But the worst part was not the attacks, Zorthal said quietly. It was the planet itself. Humans choose planets that are very much like their home world. That means the air, water, plants, and weather all suited them perfectly. For us, everything was slightly wrong. He explained how the Confederation troops struggled with the changing weather, the unfamiliar terrain, and even the local insects that seemed to bite only aliens, not humans. Each day, some of our soldiers became sick from the local environment. Our food supplies ran low because we could not eat local plants. Meanwhile, the humans ate the fruits and vegetables they grew. They drank the local water. The planet itself was their ally. A cadet with fur asked, "How long did this continue?" 3 months, Zorthal said. We lost more troops to disease and environmental problems than to human attacks. But the psychological effect was worse. Our soldiers felt watched all the time. They could not sleep well. They jumped at every sound in the forest. The humans rarely attacked during daylight, so our troops feared the night. The hologram showed a Confederation camp at night, with defensive lights pointing outward into the darkness. Beyond the lights, shadowy figures moved in the trees. Sometimes they would just make noises in the forest all night. Zorthal remembered. Strange calls and sounds to keep our soldiers awake and afraid. The next day, tired troops would make mistakes. That is when the humans would attack. Frank Miller spoke again. My grandfather was on New Eden during the invasion. He was not a fighter. He was only 14 years old. The cadets turned to look at the human with surprise. What did a child do during a war? Asked a young cadet. He carried messages between resistance groups, Frank explained. Children could move around more easily without being noticed. Many young humans helped in the resistance without fighting. Zorthal nodded. That is true. We captured some human children carrying messages written on paper, a technology so old we did not even think to check for it. We were looking for electronic communications. The commander shut off the hologram. The room grew darker. After 3 months, our high command ordered us to leave New Eden, Zorthal said. We had lost too many troops and gained nothing. The human resistance never surrendered or showed themselves for a major battle. They simply waited for us to give up. He looked at each cadet in turn. That is the third lesson about human warfare. Humans will use the environment to their advantage. They will be patient. And most importantly, never believe that a human is harmless just because they are not wearing a military uniform. The room was silent. The cadets looked at Frank Miller differently now. Not with fear, but with a new kind of respect. Our leaders called for peace talks 1 year after New Eden, Zorthal concluded. We realized that even if we won battles in space, holding human planets would cost too many lives. The Confederation could not afford such a war. Commander Zorthal stood in silence for a long moment. The cadets waited, unsure if he would continue. Finally, the old alien commander moved to a small table and poured himself a cup of blue liquid. His hands shook slightly as he drank. There is another story I must tell you, he said, his voice lower than before. One I did not plan to share today. But you need to know this to understand why peace with humans was the only choice. The cadets leaned forward. Even Frank Miller looked surprised. This happened in the 7th year of the war, Zorthal began. By then, both sides had lost many ships and many lives. The Confederation High Command decided we needed to show our strength. To make humans fear us so much they would surrender. Touched his control band again. A new hologram appeared showing a small planet orbiting a yellow star. This was Haven Colony, Zorthal explained. A small human settlement with about 50,000 people. It had no military base, only civilian, research stations and farms. Our leaders chose it as a target to send a message to all humans. A cadet with scales spoke up. You attacked civilians? That goes against Confederation war rules. Yes, Zorthal said simply. Many officers protested. Some even resigned. But the High Command said this would end the war quickly and save lives in the long run. The hologram showed 20 large Confederation warships approaching the planet. I was not there, Zorthal continued, but I saw the recordings later. Our fleet surrounded Haven and sent a message to the colony. They had 6 hours to evacuate before we would destroy the main settlement. Frank Miller stood up suddenly. His face had gone pale. You're talking about the Haven massacre. Zorthal nodded slowly. Yes, that is what humans called it afterward. The cadets looked back and forth between the commander and the human, feeling the tension in the room. What happened? Asked a young cloud-being cadet. The humans had only 3 small transport ships in the colony, Zorthal explained. Not enough to evacuate everyone in 6 hours. They asked for more time. Our fleet commander refused. He wanted to show that the Confederation was strong and would not bend. The hologram showed small dots representing transport ships taking off from the planet, filled with people. When the 6 hours ended, only about 5,000 humans had escaped. Zorthal continued. Our ships launched missiles at the main settlement. From orbit, it looked like a complete success. The buildings were destroyed. The Confederation announced that we had shown our power. The hologram showed explosions across the planet's surface. But then something happened that no one expected, Zorthal said. A human fleet appeared at the edge of the system. Not military ships, civilian vessels, hundreds of them from all over human space. Mining ships, transport vessels, private yachts, medical ships. They came for the survivors. The cadets watched as countless small ships appeared on the hologram, moving toward Haven. Our fleet commander ordered them to stay away, Zorthal said. He threatened to fire on them, but they kept coming. There were too many to stop. They were not afraid. Frank Miller spoke again, his voice tight with emotion. The civilian armada, over 300 ships that volunteered for the rescue mission. They knew they might be attacked, but they came anyway. Yes? Zorthal nodded. Our fleet commander did not fire on them. Even he could not bring himself to attack unarmed rescue ships, so he withdrew the fleet. The hologram showed the Confederation ships moving away, while the swarm of human vessels descended to the planet. What our attack had not done, Zorthal continued, was scan below the surface. Many human colonies build underground shelters for storms or other emergencies. Thousands of people had survived in these bunkers. The civilian ships rescued over 30,000 survivors. A cadet with brown fur asked, "How is this a story about human warfare?" These were rescue ships, not warships. That is exactly the point, Zorthal replied. What happened next changed the war forever. News of the attack spread throughout human space. They called it a crime against humanity. Within 1 month, human military enlistment increased by 400%. The hologram changed to show human recruitment centers filled with people signing up to join the fight. Humans who had been neutral or even against the war now demanded action, Zorthal explained. Their government had been considering peace talks before Haven. After the attack, that became impossible. Their leaders would have been overthrown if they had suggested surrender. Frank Miller nodded slowly. My grandmother enlisted after Haven. She had been a teacher. She became a communications officer on a destroyer. The human military grew faster than we thought possible, Zorthal continued. Their factories worked day and night building ships and weapons. Their scientists developed new technologies. Everyone worked toward one goal, making sure nothing like Haven would happen again. The hologram showed human shipyards working at full capacity, new vessels being completed at an alarming rate. 3 months after Haven, human forces launched coordinated attacks on Confederation outposts in 7 systems, Zorthal said. We were not prepared for their numbers or their fury. They fought differently now, with a cold anger that made them even more dangerous. The hologram showed battle after battle, with human forces pressing forward relentlessly. The High Command had thought the Haven attack would break human spirit, Zorthal said. Instead, it united them like nothing before. We had not understood something fundamental about humans. He shut off the hologram and faced the cadets directly. Humans protect their own, Zorthal said. Attack one human settlement, and you attack all humans everywhere. They see themselves as connected across planets and systems. The civilians who flew to Haven were not ordered to go. They chose to risk their lives to save strangers. Frank Miller stood up again. Over 70 civilian ships were damaged during the rescue. 28 humans died when their life support systems failed in the damaged ships. They knew the risks. Zorthal nodded. And that is the fourth lesson about human warfare. When threatened, humans do not break apart. They come together. They become stronger. What seems like a decisive victory can become your worst mistake. The cadets were silent, processing everything they had heard. Many looked at Frank Miller with new understanding. That is why our leaders finally called for real peace talks, Zorthal said. Not because we could not win individual battles, but because each victory made humans fight harder. The war could have continued for decades. The cost would have been too great for both sides. The commander moved slowly back to the center of the room. He looked tired after telling his stories. Tomorrow, most of you will begin training exercises with human officers, Zorthal said. You will learn their tactics, and they will learn yours. This is the new way. We are stronger together than we ever were as enemies. The cadets stood as the commander prepared to leave. They saluted him in the Confederation style, pressing their right limbs to their chests. Remember these stories, Zorthal said. Not to fear humans, but to understand them, and be grateful that they are now our allies, not our enemies. As the cadets filed out of the room, Frank Miller approached the old commander. The human reached out his hand in the traditional human greeting. After a moment, Zorthal extended his upper right limb and they shook hands. Thank you for telling the truth, Frank said quietly. Even the hard parts. Zorthal nodded. The young ones need to know, so history does not repeat. The next morning, the training vessel hummed with activity. Young cadets hurried through the corridors, talking excitedly about their upcoming exercises. Today they would work with human officers, for the first time. After hearing Commander Zorthal's stories, many felt nervous about meeting more humans. Commander Zorthal walked slowly toward the main training hall. His old legs carried him with less speed than in his fighting days, but his 4 eyes were alert, watching the young cadets. He had one more lesson to teach them. The large doors to the training hall slid open. Inside, 5 human officers stood in a line, wearing the dark blue uniforms of the Joint Space Force. Frank Miller stood with them. Behind the humans were 10 Confederation officers from different species. They would all work together today. The cadets filed in and stood at attention. They looked at the humans with new respect and caution after yesterday's war stories. Zorthal moved to the center of the room. Before you begin your training exercises, there is something else you should know about humans. Something just as important as what I told you yesterday. The cadets waited silently. What more could there be to learn about these strange and dangerous beings? 20 years after the peace agreement was signed, Zorthal began. A Confederation colony world called Nexus 4 faced a terrible disaster. Their sun began to release massive solar flares that their shields could not handle. The colony had 200,000 people, but not enough ships to evacuate everyone before the next big flare hit. A cloud-being cadet spoke up. I remember learning about this in history class. Wasn't that only 50 years ago? Yes. Zorthal nodded. I was much older then, but still serving as an advisor to the fleet. We sent all available ships, but calculations showed we would be 3 days too late. At least 50,000 people would die before we could reach them. The commander touched his control band. A hologram appeared showing a planet with a violently flaring star nearby. We sent distress calls to everyone in range, including human space. Zorthal continued. Remember, this was not long after the war. Many still did not trust humans. Some believed they would ignore our call for help. Frank Miller stepped forward. But we didn't ignore it. No, Zorthal agreed. The humans did not ignore it. Within 6 hours of our distress call, 15 human military vessels changed course and headed for Nexus 4 at maximum speed. They were on training exercises near the border of our space. Their commanders did not wait for official orders. They simply went. The hologram showed the human ships, moving quickly toward the endangered planet. The human ships arrived 2 days before the next solar flare, Zorthal said. 2 days before our own rescue fleet could get there. They immediately began evacuation efforts. Their ships were not designed for large-scale evacuation, but they made them work. The hologram showed human ships loading Confederation citizens, beings with shells, scales, tentacles, and many other non-human features. The humans worked without rest for 48 hours, Zorthal continued. Their medical teams treated injured aliens they had never seen before. Their engineers modified their ships to carry more people. Their pilots flew dangerous runs through solar radiation that damaged their vessels. A cadet with 6 arms asked, "Did they save everyone?" "Yes," Zorthal said. "When the solar flare hit, the last transport was already leaving the surface. Not one life was lost. The humans saved 50,000 Confederation citizens who would have died without their help." The cadets looked at the human officers with surprise. This was not the kind of story they had expected after yesterday's war tales. "But there is more," Zorthal said. "When our fleet arrived, 3 human ships were badly damaged from the radiation. One, the UNS Everest, had critical engine failures. They had pushed their systems beyond safe limits to make the rescue in time. The hologram showed a large human ship with visible damage to its hull and engine section. Captain Abby Nelson of the Everest stayed behind as the other ships escorted our people to safety," Zorthal said. "Her engines were failing. Her shields were weak. The next solar flare would likely destroy her ship. But she had made her choice." Frank Miller spoke again. "Captain Nelson sent the message that became famous throughout both our civilizations. If we survived a war with each other, I'm not about to let a cranky star beat either of us." Some of the cadets laughed softly at the human way of speaking. "Our fleet reached them just 4 hours before the next flare," Zorthal continued. "We were able to tow the Everest to safety. Captain Nelson and her crew of 300 survived. When asked why they had risked their lives for people who had once been their enemies, do you know what she said? The cadets waited, she said, because they needed help. That's all the reason anyone should need." Zorthal's voice carried a note of wonder still after all these years. The commander shut off the hologram and faced the cadets directly. "Yesterday I told you about human warfare, about their cleverness, their determination, their willingness to sacrifice, and their unity against threats. All of that is true. But it is not the complete truth about humans." Zorthal moved closer to the line of human officers, who stood straight and proud in their uniforms. "The same traits that make humans dangerous enemies make them valuable allies," he said. "The same determination that kept them fighting during the war now drives them to uphold peace. The same courage that made them fearsome in battle makes them first to respond to a crisis. The same unity that strengthened them against us now includes us." A young cadet with green skin asked, "Commander, which is the real nature of humans? Warriors or helpers?" Frank Miller answered, "Both. Always both. Throughout our history, we have been capable of great destruction and great compassion. Sometimes, on the same day, we struggle with this duality ourselves." Zorthal nodded in agreement. "And that is your final lesson. Judge no species by only one side of their nature, especially humans." The old commander looked at the row of officers, human and alien, standing side by side. "Today you will begin training together," he said to the cadets. "You will learn from each other. You will become stronger together. Remember both the warning and the hope in my stories." Commander Zorthal stepped back and saluted in the Confederation manner. The human officers returned the salute in their own style, hands to foreheads. "Class dismissed," Zorthal said. "Your joint training exercises begin now." As the cadets broke into mixed groups with the officers, Zorthal watched with satisfaction. The fear in the young alien's eyes had been replaced with something better, respect and curiosity. Frank Miller walked over to the old commander. "Thank you," he said, "for telling both kinds of stories. Truth has many sides, Zorthal replied. They needed to hear them all. Together, the human officer and the alien commander watched the future of their peoples beginning to work together, learning from the past, but not bound by it.